Hello! Today we are decoding Jim Collins' bestseller, Good to Great, a book that I believe answers that very important question: how do companies set themselves apart from competition? How do they rise above mediocrity? Jim Collins and his team studied public US companies in 3 groups over 5 years. The first group was good to great companies. So these are companies that were performing at or below the average stock market performance for 15 years and then transitioned to generating cumulative returns of at least 3 times the general stock market average over the next 15 years, thereby moving from being just good to being great. The second group that was studied was companies that had the same opportunities as the previous group, yet continued to stay mediocre or shrunk further during the same time of transition. The third group was the unsustained comparison companies that suddenly rose to the pinnacle of greatness and then slid back to performing even lower than the average. They were unable to sustain their growth. Based on all the research, Jim Collins records his findings and observations in this book. Businesses and leaders can learn what good to great companies do differently that makes them successful. So let's examine these recommendations. The author recommends leaders to follow the concept of a hedgehog. Just like a hedgehog curls itself up into a spiky, inaccessible ball when attacked by a cunning fox full of sneaky attacks and tactics, companies too need to find their hedgehog concept and adhere to it with staunch commitment. This is what makes the hedgehog prevail day after day. Companies need to ask themselves these questions. What can we be best at? How can we add value to a customer's life or business? What can we get passionate about? What are the key performance factors that we need to focus on and that will lead us to success? Companies need to develop their success framework based on these key points. After careful consideration and a lot of thought and constant iteration, good to great companies discovered their own hedgehog concept and then stuck with it. All decisions in the company were made to align with this single concept, ensuring that the company never forgot what it stood for, what it was passionate about, and success followed. The example of the drugstore chain Walgreens and Eckerd Pharmacy serve well to explain this point. While Walgreens identified their hedgehog concept as, "We will be the best, most convenient drugstore with a high customer profit per visit." All strategic moves and decisions were made keeping this hedgehog concept in mind. Relentlessly pursuing this helped them outperform the stock market by a factor of 7. Eckerd Pharmacy, on the other hand, had no hedgehog concept, and its efforts were scattered in several directions before the company eventually ceased to be an independent entity. Bottom line, find your own hedgehog concept to get clarity on the path to follow. The second learning is that success always happens in small incremental steps. Good to great companies seemed to go through sudden and monumental transformation. However, this was not entirely true. The success of these companies happened over baby steps in the direction of their hedgehog concept. This kind of adherence and commitment led to a circle of progress and motivation. The author cites the example of the steel manufacturer Nucor. that was on the verge of bankruptcy in 1965. The company's hedgehog factor was that they wanted to make good quality and affordable steel, and they realized they could do so by building mini mills, which was a cost-effective and flexible form of steel production. They realized that if they kept pushing in one direction, they could still become one of the most profitable companies in the country. They built many mini mills, kept their costs low and quality high, kept gaining customers, till after 2 decades, they reached their goal of being one of the most profitable companies in the United States. Other companies that did not take consistent small steps in one direction, but instead aimed for dramatic decisions and hasty takeovers, were left behind. Such companies failed to gather momentum and deliver, which eventually led to their decline. Bottom line, success is a result of small, incremental steps in a consistent manner in the right direction. The third learning recommended in the book is that technology should be viewed as an enabler and an accelerator towards the goal. Never should technology be the goal itself. Good to great companies understand that technology can be the means to an end and hence must be used with purpose. Such companies contemplate whether new technology propels them further on their path, and if so, would adopt it wholeheartedly and would even become pioneers in it. If the new technology did not add fuel to their fire, they simply ignore it or match their industry's pace in adopting it. Comparison companies, on the other hand, feel threatened by new technology and make expensive mistakes by adopting something that does not serve their goal. Their attempts at embracing new technology stems from fear, insecurity, and lack of understanding of the overarching objective of the company. Like my mentor always says, they act from a place of desperation rather than a place of inspiration. The example of Walgreens versus drugstore in their adoption of e-commerce is an appropriate example here. Walgreens used the online platform to push their original strategy, whereas drugstore lacked one. It is no surprise that Walgreens was immensely successful with their initiative, while drugstore lost nearly all of its original value in a year. Bottom line, technology should be viewed as an enabler and must never take precedence over the goal. The fourth learning that the author writes about is that all good to great companies have the benefit of level 5 leadership. Watch our video on the 5 levels of leadership to understand what it is. Now, level 5 leaders are qualified by these adjectives: humble, single-mindedly ambitious for their company, result-driven, selfless, and inspiring. They are not driven by ego. In fact, modesty and humility are key attributes of a level 5 leader. Such leaders take ownership of failures and shortcomings while being generous about sharing credit for achievements. A comparison between two great leaders like Darwin Smith of Kimberly-Clark and Stanley Gold of Rubbermaid is made here. Smith was unassuming and dressed and lived modestly. He refused to cultivate an image of himself as a hero or a celebrity. Stanley Gold, on the other hand, was tyrannical and dynamic, but then failed to leave behind a strong group of successors. Bottom line, good to great companies enjoy level 5 leaders that drives their success. The fifth point that the author elucidates is the importance of having the right people in the right job. It is important to have the right people positioned in the right place, and they in turn will lead the company to success. Equally important is to get the wrong people out of the company. A great example here is Wells Fargo and Company, an American multinational financial services company headquartered in San Francisco, California. It is the world's fourth largest bank by market capitalization and the fourth largest bank in US by total assets. When Dick Colley took over as CEO, one of the first things he did was to get the best and brightest people into the company. This helps the company prevail over the banking industry deregulation. In fact, Warren Buffett called Wells Fargo's executives as the best management team in business. A great team was key to the spectacular success of the organization. What guiding principles do good to great companies follow to apply this learning? Well, here are some points. Good to great companies hire for attitude and character and train for skills and professional ability. They focus on who to pay and how to pay, which means plan your compensation, benefits, and incentives based on achievements. Create an environment that makes it difficult for non-workers to survive and hard workers to thrive. Good to great companies always act immediately if they have the wrong person. Either find a more suitable role for him or her, or part ways with them. Bottom line, the right people in the right place will lead your company to success. The sixth tenet that is recommended in the book is that good to great companies confront reality with courage and faith that they would prevail over all odds. This is called the Stockdale paradox, named after a US admiral who went through severe torture in prison during the Vietnam War, yet never lost faith that he would meet his family again. A caveat here is that one must be optimistic while also keeping one's eyes on reality. A mix of optimism and realism is what makes a winning survival combination. Stockdale credited his survival to his ability to keep faith while also understanding the reality of his situation as a prisoner of war. This learning is particularly useful when companies are faced with stiff competition or regulatory changes that are beyond their control. Instead of buckling under pressure, good to great companies assess the facts, face it the way it is, and keep their spirits up. A wonderful case study here is when Procter & Gamble entered the paper-based goods market. Existing leading companies like Scott Paper and Kimberly-Clark responded very differently to this mammoth competition. Scott Paper assumed their defeat early on and tried to diversify to avoid competition. Kimberly-Clark, on the other hand, relished the opportunity to compete against a giant like P&G. 2 decades later, Kimberly-Clark owned Scott Paper and were doing just as well as P&G. Bottom line, face the unpleasant reality but never lose faith. A mix of optimism and realism. Lesson 7. Good to great companies foster an environment of openness where unpleasant facts can be discussed without fear. The author recommends that leaders take the role of a Socratic moderator, coming from the great philosopher Socrates' style of thinking. This means leaders must ask thoughtful and thought-provoking questions to uncover facts and also trigger people's minds. Healthy conflict must be encouraged to arrive at the best business decisions. Good to great companies do not have better or more information. They simply deal with available information and data intelligently and honestly, unlike other companies. Here are some more useful points. When things go wrong, assess, analyze, learn, and move on. Do not repeat the mistake. Do not assign blame when things don't work out. This will only discourage people from being creative. Agree on performance criteria and set up clear red flag mechanisms for managers to pay attention to the harsh facts. Bottom line, nurture an environment where unpleasant facts can be brought out in the open without the fear of judgment or prejudice. Lesson 8. Remember the hedgehog concept we discussed at the beginning? We come a full circle with Lesson 8. Good to great companies practice rigorous self-discipline to stay focused on the hedgehog concept. This self-discipline is not enforced by a tyrannical CEO, but it is a sense of ownership that every employee feels towards their organization. An example cited in the book is that of triathlete Dave Scott, who in spite of rigorous daily exercise would still rinse his daily meal of cottage cheese with water to minimize fat consumption. Such was his level of sincerity. Companies like Wells Fargo saw spectacular success and prosperity due to rigorous self-discipline, where every employee took ownership and practiced commitment towards their vision. This is in contrast to other companies like Rubbermaid that was ruled by a tyrannical CEO, enforcing discipline upon employees. Not surprisingly, once the CEO moved out, Rubbermaid lost 59% of its value in a few years. Bottom line, rigorous self-discipline and shared ownership will keep companies on their hedgehog concept and hence success. So here is a quick summary of the key points that we've discussed in this book Decode. Companies can transition from good to great by adhering to a simple strategic concept that is supported by the right leaders who foster a culture of openness and ownership. The mantra is here. Find your hedgehog concept and stick to it to achieve success. Remember that success comes from small baby steps in the right direction. Progress over perfection is the key. Allow new technology to be an enabler and accelerator towards a goal, and not the goal itself. Develop level 5 leaders in your organization. Level 5 leaders will lead your organization to success. Always focus on having the right person in the right place. Confront the unpleasant reality, but keep your faith and spirits high. Allow harsh reality to be discussed openly with no fear. Foster rigorous self-discipline and commitment to your hedgehog concept. We hope you enjoyed this book Decode. Thank you for watching us.